Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davis, and you're watching Season 3 of Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my sponsors, Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum's here to make it easy from their instant quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes as you want for free to their 24-hour customer service support. Mixum's here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now, you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed so many successful Kickstarter campaigns, a bunch of them you have even heard about on this very show. And they currently offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and Mixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com. And right now, listeners of my show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on their first order. So that is mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive a 5% discount on your first order. Furthermore, I like my comics to arrive perfectly, and what I use to protect my comic books and when I send out books is BCW supplies. Use Pop Anime Comics at checkout to get 10% off your order. And then also you can go buy my shirt on Redbubble because, well, I need money and I like this shirt. It's making fun of Taco Bell, the most interesting man in the world, and Gundam. So go buy my shirt, everybody. I need the money. And so without further ado, I have with me Taylor Campbell and Allison Sheppard from Outlaws Comics. So I'm back, both of you.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, so you guys got a lot of stuff going on, but your Kickstarter is brand new, like 3 hours brand new.
Sure is.
So, and obviously you're doing the book Unidentified. And so before we get into it, because very few people know about this book, because it legitimately just launched like 3 hours ago. So what is the basic premise for everybody who is new and they're 3 hours new?
Well, the book, it's gone through about 8 different phases, but it finally came out to a cowboy. It opens, and you only see him in his own time in the first page. He runs into some trouble and gets knocked out, and his partner shoots him up with something, and he wakes up 110 years in the future in 2010. And
something like this.
Yes, sir. Ready to Hulk out. And when he gets here, he has no memory of who he is. He obviously still remembers all the muscle memory stuff, how to kick ass and such. But not too far down in a couple pages, he finds himself in a situation where he has to help a pregnant young lady who's who's being chased by werewolves, and the whole town is trying to keep her captive and take her baby.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on because you got a semi-traditional cowboy story involved in this, but you also got some fantasy and you got some other shit going on, for lack of a better word. And we're going to really dive into this story because it is such an interesting thing between the traditional and untraditional and fantasy and werewolves. So last time I checked, the Wild West didn't have werewolves running around, at least my Wild West back in the day. But where did this story come from? Because obviously you said it went through a bunch of phases and it's not a traditional cowboy story.
Well, originally he wasn't supposed to be a cowboy. All I had when I started it was his name was going to be John Doe, and he wasn't going to know who he was. That's all I knew. And then at some point he was going to be a hunter of monsters who gets knocked out cold during a hunt, and then when he wakes up, he doesn't remember anything. And then I had a friend of mine who's a pretty decent writer working on it for a while, but he took it into a weird space territory, and there was like galactic shit going on. And I'm like, I need it to be more grounded than this. We're in the supernatural realm here. We're not in the outer space realm. So I just kind of took it back and brought it a little more down to earth. And I thought up the cowboy idea, and I liked that. And then the character, I needed this character's baby to be in the future of our books. So I figured I would just drop her into this book. A lot of it, I got the idea from The Last of Us. I don't know if you play video games.
I know of it. I am not a video game expert, but I know the game you're talking about.
Yeah. I love those games. They're probably my favorite games next to Alan Wake. And the relationship between Joel and Ellie in the games is kind of what sparked it on for me. So
to even talk about this, and we're going to dive into John in a second, but one of the things is that obviously I like monster hunting type books. I'm a huge Zenoscope fan. Obviously, Bell from Zenoscope is sort of a monster hunter, and then there's a few others, Van Helsing. And so obviously this has an element of that, but that's also been done tremendously in a lot of ways. And so what was this like really building out, and even for you, Allison, as well? Because obviously, you've had some parts in this book, and even this entire Outlaw Comics is saying this has been done, and we want more of an original idea, because that's what I am finding problematic in comics right now, is that everything has been done before, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I also want different. And so what is that, figuring that out and saying, hey, how do we shift this around and add a little twist to it?
you want to go first?
You go first.
I didn't write it. It was a question to both of you. So
Yeah. I mean, I like werewolves. They're a cool monster all the way around. They're awesome. And I didn't really get to play with them in the last book. We focused way more on demons in Kane, at least in the first season. So werewolves seemed like a cool thing to put a cowboy up against. And later on in the story, you'll figure out, if you really just think about it, you'll figure out who the werewolves are, and that maybe John's not such the nice guy that he thought he was. So it's going places to make it different, because a lot of the monsters in our universe, they're not exactly evil. Not all of them, like Olivia and Kane, our vampire. She's not bad. So in this case, maybe back in the day, the werewolves were the good guys.
For me, I didn't really have such a big hand in Unidentified, but I have considered this for Kane, at least. And I'm not super worried about making things like super unique, super different. I just kind of let whatever comes to me come to me, because if I get so caught up in, oh, this has to be different, it has to be unique, then nothing happens.
yeah, no, it's just I have a problem in comics, and the reason why, and me and my guest before we're talking about this, where it's almost like everything is not original, and it's almost like Marvel, DC, Image are recycling concepts. And I go and look at a Kickstarter, and I'm like, hey, what is different about this? I don't know if you guys seen Cowboys vs. Aliens, which is a ridiculous movie, and I enjoyed it. Yeah. It's an old movie, but it's a great movie in a lot of ways if you're half drunk. But that's not the point. But it's this idea that certain things in Cowboys have been recycled, but now it's how do you differentiate it? Because that's what draws me to a Kickstarter at this point. It is saying I need something that's different, and I need something that it's got an edge to it, and we go dark per se. And this is getting interesting with this, and even diving into John a little bit, because obviously he is in the Wild West. He's in a shootout. I'm not exactly sure. I think he's shooting at wolves, and then his partner's like, you can't die. And that sort of sets stuff up of them in a cave and shoot him up with some green liquid. And so what was this like really setting up John? Because that's where this story really starts to take place, is that we got the past, but then he's also transported 100, 200 years in the future. And a lot of cool shit's going on. What was that like really that premise of?
Well, that one line, the you can't die, that's some world building that's going to come back in the future. Just like the page with that blonde lady. I think it's the next page that kind of looks like Allison. She's going to be you're going to see her quite a bit in a lot of projects that we work on. But building John's a cool character. I did take a few things here and there from other characters that I do like. But, I mean, he's just a hard ass, and he doesn't know who he is. and he's going to go through a lot of shit to realize some things about himself he might not like. He's a really, really fun character. It took a while because I've been working on Kane for so long. So when I started writing the first script, it took me about a month to write the first 5 pages to really get footing with it. And I switched for a minute and went to write something else for Kane. I wrote a whole issue in like a day. It was a long process trying to get into writing different characters, but it's been really fun.
And even to go further into John, because obviously he comes out of a slumber. He sort of recognizes 2 people know where to find him. And then he's got, a polished rifle or a polished shotgun. I'm not too sure which it is. He's got, new gear. And then he sees sort of a familiar horse that he's familiar with. And he's like, I don't know what the fuck's going on here, but we're just going to roll with it. Never seen matches this small. But he just sort of rolls with the punches. And he gets a weird letter too. And obviously, as you sort of said, he's sort of a hard ass, but he's not really asking questions, and he's somewhat desensitized or experiencing culture shock. And what was this really like building him out? Because we don't get much of a sense of who he is and his emotions really throughout the entire first issue. And you kind of just see this mission-driven, almost like God-sent type of guy, almost Terminator-like, if you will.
Yeah, that's kind of how I meant to write him. He's a stoic dude. And it's not so much that he's in culture shock. It's more at the very beginning of it, the fact that, well, he doesn't really know who he is. He's not sure where he came from. And he's in the woods. So at that particular second, pretty much everything looks the same, except for some of his equipment looks different. And there's some things there he's never seen before. But later in it, he gets so entrenched in everything he has to do that he really doesn't have time to slow down and take it in.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of shit going on, and he's got a little bit of an anger issue, and he's a little bit of he's pretty dangerous with the tomahawk, and his guns and his bullets and all that stuff. And obviously, what is that like? Because you do have his muscle memory kicking in, and obviously with the sense that he's a very, very good cowboy. He's a very good, Wild West man. And it kind of shows when he's fighting these werewolves. And, he's not, while he's getting accustomed to his situation and the politics of his situation, he's pretty good at fighting, which suggests certain things about his nature of what he was before all this. And what was that like? Because there's a line when he meets the girl saying, oh, you might have killed, some of the father's, siblings is something to that effect. And so what was that like? 'Cause it's a very interesting situation that's now about to unfold.
It's been really cool. And John, I wrote him because he's the kind of character I've always liked. He doesn't always go, that kind of character doesn't always go over well these days, but I kind of like a dude who just doesn't care. And if something needs to be done, if someone's head needs to be crushed to fuck in, he is more than happy to do it if he has to.
So let's actually talk about that, because that's actually super interesting, because it's also, the girl who's a foil. John is sort of a man's man to some degree. He's also not PC. He's definitely sort of just doing what he needs to do, and he doesn't necessarily care about the consequences. And there's been a lot of pushback in a lot of sectors. And so what is this like to say, well, we're writing a character that really is just going out there and is what a cowboy is, what a Maverick is in a lot of ways. Because that's tricky now, especially with things being, HR'd out, for lack of a better word, not to get too political. But what is that like when you're writing comics saying, hey, this is the type of character we need to do? And what do you feel when you're pushing out a book like this? Because unfortunately, everybody has an opinion, and people won't back certain books if it has a certain message.
Well, when it comes to John and his character, I kind of look at it like F is for family. It's set in the 70s. So Bill Burr can do whatever he wants with that show. I mean, if you notice, there are things that are in this book that I didn't write for Christian. or for Damon or for anyone in Kane, because they grew up in the 2000s like I did. They have had to deal with all the shit that we have had to deal with. He just woke up out of 1885. Things were a whole lot different there. And if I wrote him like somebody now, it would be disingenuous to his character. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I get that, but even just running that risk, because, there's always the whole thing where somebody just might not get it, or people now in comics and throughout even television want to judge everything as if it's today, and they want to judge something that was said 30 years ago, for instance, in today's standard. And it's a very tricky art to say, well, John doesn't have the same standards in that, I think, Danielle has, or Daniil has in a lot of ways. And so what is that like? Because it creates a very interesting situation as a writer, because now you have somebody who is not at the same standards, gets a pass to some degree. And now you have a cultural shift, you have a physical shift going on, you have a conflict ensuing, and you got a lot of layers being played out all at once because of that. And it creates a very interesting frictional situation. So what was that like, building that up? Because Danielle, I think that's how it's said, right?
It's Danielle.
And she's sort of interesting because she's the opposite of John in every fashion.
Mm-hmm. It's weird for me because I'm not super conservative, but I'm also not super liberal. I'm what they used to call a libertarian. And I don't want to offend people, but I also don't want to water down the stories that I want to tell so that people don't get their feelings hurt. If you can't read something or watch something and enjoy it for what it is, if it's not like super offensive, like I'd never write like offensive slurs. I'm just not going to do it because that's not who I am. But I don't know. I just don't want to water down what I'm trying to say or what I'm trying to write to appease everybody.
But isn't that what a writer is supposed to do in a lot of ways? So I have a friend, Larry Higgins, who does Niobe. Now, Larry has certain politics, but he wrote a book with Niobe Birthright about abortion. And there was these two superheroes with different opposition and thoughts on abortion, and they were meant to protect this woman who was either going to have an abortion or not have an abortion from a mob up somewhere. And these superheroes were too busy arguing over their political positions that the baby essentially got killed because of the mob that ensued. Now, that's not, in my opinion, a pro-abortion or an anti-abortion. That's showing what happens when superheroes get moral conflicts and deal with things. And obviously, that's how I view her in a lot of ways, is that idea where it's not for or against having a baby per se out of wedlock. It's the idea that this is now a moral situation because there's a kid involved and some other stuff. And so isn't that what a writer is supposed to do? In a lot of ways, is to table the politics and tell a story that makes you think about both sides and even the entire conflict that's ensuing, because that's what's sort of going on, I feel, sort of a sub-level in the comic. And when I read the script, and it's very interesting. And I think it's a very cool component of the entire comic, because then we're also dealing with the baby's father, I think, is a werewolf, which adds even more complications to it.
Well, a lot of it, like Kane, is personal to me because the character of Danielle is someone I know. And her baby is based on my what I call my extra kid, who I haven't seen in 2 years. But her dad's a steaming pile of shit. And the ending for him might be a little bit of therapy for me. But I mean, as far as that's the dichotomy between John and Danielle. You got two completely different people on two completely different ends of the spectrum with those two. And you get to see both sides. Allison, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just thinking, obviously I don't write it, but leaning too heavily one way or another. So going super politically correct or going like balls to the wall, just offensive as shit. You shouldn't really do either. Having the balance where people see both sides. You're going to offend someone no matter what you do. So might as well be true to the story you're trying to tell. And censoring yourself for the sake of someone's feelings doesn't sit well with me. Like, obviously don't run around insulting people just for the sake of it, but if it's part of the character, I think you should include it and then have someone a little more woke or whatever, so like everyone is being represented. I feel is the best way to go.
Yeah, no, because I just think it's super, super interesting what's going on, because obviously I read a lot of comics, and typically I don't read a lot of comics that deal with a father being, somewhat out of the picture, or, forced in, the mother's trying to escape, and then a whole town's being held hostage, and the baby is sort of thrown in the middle a little bit, and then you have a strong character that's sort of forcing it and really dealing with the whole family dynamic. And it's very interesting because I think you two hit a very cool position in this comic as Outlaw Comics, where you're touching upon a very interesting, and whether you want to be political or not, you're touching on a very, very topical debate right now in this country. And there's a lot on both sides. And I think that whether it was intended or not, this is very much a cool discussion point, and it's super interesting because I picked up on it. And maybe I'm reading a little too much into it, and it's my biases. But obviously, I just think that there's that going on, and you could read it like that. You could read it almost as a political discussion point, or you could just read it as guy wants to save a girl with a kid too. And so it's super interesting in that front. And I think you did an amazing job figuring out how to do that, because I don't think it's preachy per se, and it's an art.
Well, obviously, personal feelings always go into it, but that is the best thing about having readers, because whenever somebody can take something from it that you may have put in on purpose, or something you didn't even mean to write, but it was something you were feeling at the time, and then you read it and you're like, you know what? He's right. I wrote that on purpose and I didn't even know it. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's super cool. And then obviously, there's a whole bunch of stuff. There's obviously the town, and these werewolves are sort of controlling the town, and there's that going on. And then, well, John has probably created a bunch of enemies in a lot of ways already by killing some of these people, and now there's consequences for that. And then obviously that is dealing with stuff, and then there's obviously the letter. And so what is this all like? Because the first issue leaves a lot more questions than answers. And there's a lot of stuff that has to be answered in this. And what was that like in building that out and really sort of laying out a bunch of foundations? Because I feel, and I read this script, I am confused as fuck in what's about to happen, where we're going, and how wide is this world going to get?
Oh, it's going to get wide. The thing about the first issue is it took me so long to write, and it was so fun because I had to lay in little things, because now it's not my first book. I can't write whatever I want because it's already in a set universe. And it happens prior to the events of the other book. So I have to lay things into it so that those can all tie together afterwards. This is my first bit of actual world building. So it's been a lot of fun. And where we're going with the second one, it's a pretty familiar landscape, and you'll probably see some familiar faces.
So let's talk about that. And I think both of you can answer that. This is that obviously you said that this takes place in the same universe as Kane. And I like the idea, and I'm seeing more. And I don't know if you guys are, I don't know how many comics you both read, but I'm a huge Zenescope fan, and even Dynamite has done it, and a variety of other companies are now starting to do it, where they're really building out their worlds. And they're also threading what has been done in the past, and they're really making a move, just either having a big event or having things collide, or building out parts collision, whatever you want to call it. And so what is this like? Because you have some guidance, but you also get to define parts of this world, and that's good and bad. And also taking a big approach, because I know comic creators who say, look, this book is in its own world and this other title's in its own world and they don't interact. And so what was all that decision as well, saying, hey, we're going to have a whole universe that we're building out here, that 6 months from now, when you launch a third title, that's going to also be in there somewhere. And because that gets tricky at a certain point, right?
Yeah. And most of these people, you know, a lot of them will probably tell you that the MCU probably got a lot of people to start doing the world building. But embarrassingly, as a grown man, I'm a really big fan of the Arrowverse, and that's where I got it from. I love those shows, even though they're corny boy shirt off shows. And I mean, I love seeing characters that I like from one show showing up in another one. It's one of my favorite things in the world. So it was always supposed to be like this. Everything that I write from here on until I die will probably be set in this universe. It's awesome.
So to even go further into that, because where this gets tricky, and I obviously speak to a lot of comic people, is that what parameters have you set up and how far do you have it mapped out? Because when you start going into world building, and we've seen this in the MCU with, you know, Spider-Man No Way Home, they kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit, where it's a little wonky what they've done in some of the Marvel movies, and some of that timeline stuff doesn't make sense. And so what is this like for you, and how are you planning and building it out and putting all the pieces together? Because that's where it gets tricky. And I know, because I spoke to a lot of different people, and they all have different ways they do it. And I'm curious, like, what do you have in motion, and how do you plan all this out? Because it gets complicated when this book takes place before Kane, but it directly impacts Kane. And then when you do another book that directs it over here, and then this event over here that doesn't seem connected goes there, and then you have a whole WCW booking crisis on your hand.
What you say is true, but tell me it wasn't badass to watch Tobey Maguire walk through that portal as an older man. That was awesome. It was
great.
The fact that they made Andrew Garfield. The fact that they turned Andrew Garfield into the Spider-Man that everybody thought he was, the mopey emo Spider-Man, was amazing. They made him a whiner, which is how I always saw him. But, I mean, it helps that originally I planned on hiring writers to do each series, but anytime I hired someone, they wrote something I hated, no matter how much detail I gave them. They wrote something I hated. So I just decided that even if it turns my hair gray before I turn 35, I will write every single book. So it helps to keep everything in focus. And whenever I have to write, like, what is it? Like a string from one to the other, I can always go back to an old script and look and make sure I'm writing the right thing. And what I'm going to start doing is, I have it mapped out from where we are. I mean, I refer to them as seasons, but storylines, whatever, at least 3 seasons ahead, possibly 4, depending on how I do it. But we have Kane, we have Unidentified for this round, and then the next one, we have another book that we're going to launch for the next series of books we do. And then after that, we're going to launch a 4th one. That's how far we have it mapped out right now. And also for our big, like, finale of this, it's basically our endgame storyline that we're going to do in 4 seasons from now. I think I'm going to do an anthology as a stretch goal for every Kickstarter we do between here and then. And I'm going to do like a 10-page anthology story for every Kickstarter that we do. And I'm going to do it in black and white to add other characters that I want to have in the final story when it comes time. Because I don't want to spend another $3,000 per book to introduce a minor character. So
And so, even to go further into this, and so what is this like for you, Allison? That obviously you're a major part in building and help building this out, and obviously going down and really adding a lot of art into this world in some capacity, whether it's Kane or doing cover art and all that stuff, because you're just as important to helping building out this world. And so, what is that like for you, knowing that everything is about to interconnect and that it's all leading to an event, and then something's going to shoot out of those events as well? Because obviously, the art is just as important. And I'm sure you have input into some of this stuff that's going on as well.
It started out a little bit stressful because I'm so detail oriented, where I'm like perfectionist. So I was like, oh, I got to make sure this is like exactly right if it's going to keep popping up. But eventually I just had to learn to let go and start not meeting deadlines, but just let it come, make it. As time goes on, I definitely get better and better. Shit, I didn't mean to click that.
Better and faster.
But I kind of leave most of the world building up to him, and I follow whatever description he gives me, really.
So to even go into this, because obviously I've seen world building fail. I've seen people build really big worlds and build up big concepts. And one of the things is that, what is this like, knowing that it's going in this direction, and now you're adding, because Kane was the first book and nobody knew it was a world at that point beyond just Kane and the first 2 issues of Kane. But now you're bringing in another component that provides more insight into it, because you could read Kane without having to read this book, and you could read this book without having to read Kane. But now all of a sudden, when this stuff's now leading into each other and it's expanding the world and giving more insight into the world, what is this like? As people who read both of these stories are now getting a bigger payoff. And as both the writer and the artist who worked on Kane and obviously has input, what is this like for the both of you? Because it's now creating a bigger payoff. And if when you do the next issue or the next series and the next series leading up to what you call your end game, what is that journey like for both of you, where you're going? Because that's a big payoff. I mean, I would imagine Marvel was thrilled at the end of Endgame because it was a huge 20-movie payoff. And so what is this like to say, hey, we're doing something now where there's a real aim at an event that actually means something? Because in Marvel and DC Comics right now, they do 50 issues and we get nowhere in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, doing Kane, it's a lot of fun, and seeing it come to life has been awesome. But I wasn't sure for a while there that we were going to go anywhere beyond it, because I kept trying to get this book made and I couldn't come up with the money to pay anyone to do it. And we had an artist who just wasn't quite working out. And then I finally found the guys that are working on it now, and they had just the right price point. Their art was awesome. And after that first page came in, it was such a stress relief. It was insane. And to see it finally coming to fruition, it's starting to feel like this is all like a real thing. I've heard Allison say it many times, that it's all actually starting to feel like an actual job, and it might actually be a thing we can do. So as that goes on, the better I'm going to feel about it. And eventually I'm going to talk her into turning it into a full-time job.
If you can pay me, yeah.
So this is actually super interesting that you brought up, and I do like to talk about brass tacks and business, and obviously I'm doing a bunch of stuff in the next year to 2 years, and obviously I did my Kickstarter, which is good, and that is a whole different entity. But what is that like in finding an art team? And I'm curious, both from the writing perspective and even you being an artist, Allison, but finding artists and then saying, hey, this thing isn't working out, and then cutting ties, because this is a problem that I feel a lot of people in comics have. And I don't know how much time you spend in Facebook groups and things like that, but I hear art horror stories. I hear people not paying their artists. I hear people underpaying their artists. I hear artists walking out when they get an advancement, and then people not getting their money back, and a variety of other problems. So what was this like, and realizing you have a problem, and sort of backing out and I don't want to sound mean, but firing your art team, for lack of a better word, and then finding a new art team that can actually deliver what you want.
That's the thing I hate the most. I hate it when I hire somebody and then I realize it's not good, and I'm like, shit, I have to be that guy. It took me 3 years. It was 3 years we had Allison on, right? The other Allison. And
Yeah, I
it
think
just
so.
wasn't, it didn't work out. And she became a friend, and that made it 10 times harder. It was so
There's
bad.
a
And
reason why I don't have my friends working for me. There's a good reason why.
yeah. Well, that's the upside about this Allison. She can be my friend because there's no world in which I ever have to fire her. Because she just keeps getting better and better and faster.
So what is that like for you though, Allison, on the art side? Because this is something that I interview a lot of writers and I interview a lot of comic people, and we don't have these conversations where we always hear this type of question from the writer's answer and their perspective. But I'm curious what it is like for you as an artist when you get a gig and then you're trying to deliver what's asked of you and how that works. Because that's something I don't know how that looks like from your perspective and even your insight into sort of figuring out saying, hey, this isn't working out and why isn't it working out, and even all that stuff. So what was that like from your perspective? It's different from the writer's perspective.
Well, it really depends on the project for me, like, and who I'm working with. I have a very hard time telling people when I have a problem. So actually, there was a little bit of time where I wasn't getting paid a whole lot. The pages were taking me forever. I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna work out, but I didn't say anything. I was like, you know what, let's just finish the issue. Let's see what happens. And I did. I was like, all right, okay. And then I don't know. I just kept sticking around. I don't know why, but I did, and now it's starting to pay off. I'm like, okay, I'm glad I did. But I've definitely worked with other people where they don't actually tell you what they want. They're like, oh no, I trust you. I'll, like, do whatever, and then I do whatever, and they're like, it's still not quite right. I'm like, well, what do you want? And they won't tell me. That's very frustrating. So I think if you're gonna like hire an artist, be as specific as possible for what you want, and make sure their style is what you're looking for. I'm kind of special where I can bend my style to be whatever you want it to be, but a lot of artists can't get out of their little box. So if you don't like what they're already making, don't ask them to change for something else.
Well, the fact that she does have that problem worked out for me, because had she just quit, we would not be where we are. And what I paid her was criminal.
And so to go even further into this, because obviously you have an advantage where obviously Allison, is part of the team and she really helped to build out Kane. And while you're the writer, Taylor, still having an artist's insight into what to look for an artist when you're looking for an artist to do another issue outside of Kane, for instance. And so what is that like? Because that gives you some insight saying, hey, what do I need? What do I'm looking for? What style? And I'm sure Allison sort of says, hey, I think this style is going to work with this book to some degree, and even how to communicate. Because I'm going to be very nice when I say this, but obviously artists sometimes are not the best communicators because they are good at drawing, for instance, and a lot of artists are very internal. Like I reach out to a lot of artists for interviews and like, I'm camera shy or I'm a very introverted person. And so what is that like for you, Taylor, to deal with that, given that you do have an artist on your side and that you have a lot of insight into that if need be?
Well, having Allison spoiled me because her style is perfect for what I was looking for. So every time I've tried to find somebody else, they've never quite lived up to what I was looking for. And it took me a while to realize that it took Allison almost 6 months to get to the style that we're at now. And she's still improving it. So when I finally found these guys, he sent the pencil and inker. He sent me character sketches. And I'm like, this isn't what I'm looking for. It looked awful. And I'm like, this isn't going to work out. I'm sorry, man. And he's like, that's fine. I'll send you the page that I owe you. because I paid him for the first page and for character sketches. And then he sent me the first page, and I'm like, did you seriously draw both of these? Because the page looks nothing like this character sketch you sent me. You're perfect. You got the perfect price point, and the page is perfect. You're good. I wanted somebody to do the same style as her, but I realized that a lot of artists aren't like her, and they like to just stick to what they know, especially people who have already been doing comics for a while. They have their own distinct style, so I just had to get out of that thinking and find somebody who had a style that I liked that wasn't the same. And for this type of book, the Old West style, the way he does it is perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah, and style is very important. And one of the things is that, because obviously you're not building a world, and you're building a universe. And one of the cool things is that obviously you could have a different style for Kane. You could have a different style for Unidentified. And then a third title that you put out, you could have a slightly different style there. But you also need to figure out how to connect those styles. And what is that like, thinking forward and making sure that while each book is different, each book does connect. Because one of the things, consistency matters, and also making it that you don't want to do a cyberpunk book right next to a Western, for instance, is a really good way to put it.
Yeah. I think it's going to be cool, man, because now as we go on past this first season of books, we're going to have more crossovers going on, and it's going to be cool to see Christian or whoever done in their style, and John and Danielle done in Allison style. I've already seen John and Danielle and Allison style on the cover, and they look awesome. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in different styles. It's going to be cool.
Yeah, so to even talk about that, because obviously you're going to be doing crossovers, and I think that opens up a whole new world where what is that going to be like? Really throwing a bunch of characters, and obviously we right now only have 2 sets of characters, but it's going to be a hell of a lot more fun when we got 4, and then how they interact and how they sort of deal with each other. And I'm also under the assumption that you're not just going to do it almost non-canon crossovers. These crossovers are going to be what are called canon, right?
Yeah.
And
well, little spoiler for the next season. The next season of Unidentified will be set in the hometown of Kane. And our group from Kane will be going elsewhere. At least our main group of guys will be going elsewhere. So John will be transplanted into that town. So we'll get to see how they maneuver the look of the town and everything. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So what is that like for you, that you've already built out the town of Kane, and now you're just dropping a character in it, because it does take a lot of work to some degree out, where you're not going to move, Kane's house into a different block, for instance, and things that have happened, and all like the park and all that stuff in the layout of the town isn't changing. But now we have a new character in there, and then possibly what John does in that town can affect when Kane comes back. And so what is that like? Because now and who knows, maybe it's 50 years before Kane is even born, which further changes things. And there's so many possibilities here that you can do with this. But it's also, now you're like almost threading a needle in a lot of ways, and dropping a lot of things, and shifting time around, and million jumping off points. And what is that like? Is it? I could think of a million solutions and possibilities now with this book. It's brilliant. It's just fucking brilliant.
Well, you are onto something. There is a time jump. It's not back, but it's forward after the end of this season. And let's just say after the conclusion of the first season of Kane, the town's not going to look the same just a little bit in the future. So John's going to have to take care of things while Christian's gone. And that's cool.
So John's going to have to be a man again.
That's right.
Is where we're going with this.
That's
clearly, right. Clearly that's what's going on. And so there's a lot of stuff that's about to happen. And obviously, we're going into the realm where there's going to be a point where jumps pretty much all lead to one road. And it's gonna get good, isn't it?
Oh, it is. We got some interesting characters coming up in the future.
And so there's a lot of stuff coming down the pike with this. And yeah, no. And I am curious, though, is that at this point, though, you don't need to read Unidentified first, per se, to understand what happened in Kane and then so on and so forth. Or is it there going to be a whole timeline of a reading order? Because obviously that's where people get confused with some of this stuff as well.
Well, the only thing is, if you could read Kane first, it would be, there are things that happen in Unidentified, especially at the end, where they tie in together in their ends. There's going to be a 5.5 for Kane and a 4.5 for Unidentified at the end. And I think I'm just going to slap them together as one book, because that's one carry-on story from the half end issue of one to the half end of the other. So you could read either one of them first. If you read Unidentified before you read Kane, there will be things that happen in it that will make other things in Kane more interesting. Or if you read Kane first and then you read Unidentified, you're going to be like, it's even better. Because there's a character that carries over that's a, what would you call her? Like a reoccurring character in Kane, who is a main character after the first issue of Unidentified.
Yeah, this is going to get very, very, very interesting, because I know sort of who you're talking about, and it's going to get very, very interesting. And there's a lot of questions as to why I think this is sort of happening, and we don't really get an answer in the first issue, but I got a feeling in Kane 3, when Kane 3 hits and Unidentified 2 hits, and possibly some other stuff that's coming down the pike. Maybe a crossover is coming next into a new title. Maybe there's a whole another thing that's going to lead somewhere down the road. We're going to get some answers as to what's going on here, why there's a time jump, what is John exactly. And I say, what is John, not who is John, because I got a feeling John is not a human anymore, per se. And there's some very, very, very interesting things. And what's that green liquid, is what we all want to know. So last time I checked, when there's neon green liquid, you go the other way. Usually. But yeah, so obviously there's a lot of cool stuff going on here, and you're really building out a universe that I think is going to be cool. And it's going to be very interesting when you create an omnibus.
That's the plan, man. And I mean, I like my writing, and oddly enough, I'm not very good at being critical with myself. That's why I had Allison read every issue before we did this, to see if I missed anything, but I don't think so, other than some spelling errors or whatever, which she's happy to tell me about. But I think it all ties together pretty well at the end.
Yeah, no, you're building a very, very interesting universe, for lack of a better word, and there's a lot of stuff about to hit, and I think that this is sort of where we're going in comics in a lot of ways, is big universes and big anthologies and things that all come together. And because you're not the first people that I've seen it with, and I've seen the big guys do it who are not in a scope. And then I've seen a lot of other people starting to do this as well. And it's getting very, very, very interesting with all that stuff. So it's a cool, cool world, I think, that's being built. And then I do, though, want to talk about the other side of this, because you guys do something cool where you give a portion to charity.
Yeah.
And so what is this? This is something that not every comic creator does publicly on their Kickstarter. I know a few people do in the realm. And so what prompted this? You did it with Kane. Now you're doing it with this book. And so what is the whole story behind this? And There's something going on also with Horizon. Wow, I can't speak today. So we're as well as with the Prince. So what is that entire story and what charity is it and all that fun stuff?
It started when I did Kane and my friend died, and we did that. It felt good to do something other than just make money. And but 50% was a bit much. They needed it, and they were my friends, so I was perfectly fine with it. It was going to her daughter, so not really making anything on the last Kickstarter personally, or to put towards anything in the future, was fine. I think in the end, I made a total of like $150 when all was said and done. But my little brother, he's a Marine. He just got back from Iraq. And a couple years ago, he turned me on to this group, Irreverent Warriors. And it's for vets who are, you know, struggling or not. And they do some funny shit. They deal with the struggles of war and being a vet with humor. And a lot of their humor is dark, and that's how I like it. And they just seemed like a good charity to do. And in order so we could give them a decent chunk of money and not lose a retarded amount of money, I decided to just do.
Everybody got the point of the word. Everybody got the point. I get scolded for using that word, and it makes me want to say it more. And I work in accessibility technically, so that's a bad word for me. And when somebody says I can't say a word, you know I'm going to say it 15 more times.
I've got an autistic son, so I get the pass.
I like to depower words, because if you say a word 50 times in a row, that word becomes normal. And when you tell me I can't say a word, that means that word has more power by definition.
Like Voldemort?
Yeah, exactly. And growing up in my house, it was like growing up in the 80s. So the word retarded wasn't really like offensive then. And in this town.
There's a great episode of South Park where they said shit 328 times. That word, and they had a counter, became so bad that people were like, this is getting ridiculous. But that word in 22 minutes was said 328 times, which actually depowered the word and made shit like the. It equated it to it. So feel free to use that word if you want.
Wasn't that the episode that like made it way more used on TV after that? Like
this was the episode where the FCC basically didn't like South Park using certain words, so this was their response to the FCC.
Yeah, it was like when FX told what's his name to stop with the gratuitous violence on Sons of Anarchy, so he ramped it up.
But anyway, continue.
Anyway, yeah, so we could afford to give them more and not lose quite as much, so we could continue to put it towards future books and hiring more people. I just decided that we do 10% of everything that we make for this year. We will send to them on December 31st. And then next year we'll choose something different.
So let's actually talk about the business side of Kickstarter, because one of the things that I funded on mine, and I'm speaking and I've run the numbers, I am not making any money, but I'm also not losing money. I also getting product. I'm also getting and covering my StreamYard costs, my Hootsuite costs, and it's building that infrastructure, and it's covering my stretch goals. And my metal card partner is getting 60 of them. I'm getting 60 of them. And now I have 60 products, or I'm getting like 58 of them. He's getting 58 for that audit. And so a lot of people talk about this. I'm curious how both of you feel on this. But people say, look, I don't make money on the Kickstarter, but the Kickstarter basically allows me to fund my book, cover my art costs, and print a lot of books that I bring to cons or put in my web store. And that's where I make my real money. And so there's a real debate, because I know people who do a $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 Kickstarter, and they're making $10K on their Kickstarter that they pay themselves as their cost. So it's a real debate, because some people run it like a business and other people do what I'm doing. And so I don't know how the two of you view it. And there's no wrong answers here, class.
We're about 10 years out from me ever paying myself anything. But I mean, making 20K and getting 10 on the back would be nice, because I'd like to rent office space because I have 4 kids and 4 cats and a dog. It'd be nice to have somewhere that I could go and write, maybe someplace in the middle. So if Allison wants to go somewhere quiet completely and do her art, she can. But I'd like to get office space. I'd like to be able to not look at my bank account and sigh to myself whenever I have to pay for a table at a convention and order books. I'm not going to pay myself for a long time. I want to see this business grow into something real before I start paying myself.
So, I'm curious, because obviously my friend Sam Quinn, he doesn't pay himself, but he picks up merchandise. So if he has a Kickstarter that does 500 books, he'll order 1,500 with the Kickstarter money. And essentially the way he's paying himself is in those 1,000 extra books that he then sells. And it's on his web store. So he's using it more along the lines where he's not making money on the Kickstarter. He's making money by selling product. And some people, though, say, I have made a decent amount of money on my Kickstarter that I can take a distribution from my Kickstarter and still order the product. And it's a very, very interesting debate going on right now. And there's, again, as I stated, depending on your Kickstarter, depending on how you're set up. I mean, if I did $20,000 on my podcast, my overhead is so low that I would be taking a distribution by definition. And I'd be taking a $5,000 distribution. But that's how my podcast business is set up. I didn't do that. If I did $5,000, I'd be taking about a $500 distribution. And so that I'm very curious how you guys are set up first in that way, because it's a fascinating position. Or if you haven't even thought about it, because you're brand new in a lot of ways.
I mean, it would be nice to be able to do that. I'm still trying to figure out how much to even charge per book at this moment. I'm charging what I can. I don't want to overcharge people, but then I'd actually like to make some money to be able to order some more books. So
how big is your book?
It's 30 pages.
How many?
30.
30? Naturally, if your printing cost should be a number, if you charge $10 and you got it down to a certain quantity, like if you could print 1,000 books, $10 would be right at the number that you should charge, and you'd make enough money on 1,000 books.
Yeah, see, I can't order that many books. So right now my printing cost after printing and shipping comes out to about $5 per book for production. Then
you should be charging at least 50% over. You should be charging, if it's $5, you should be charging 10.
That's what I charge. I charge 10.
That's about
10,
right.
10 plus shipping.
And then if you have a nude variant, you should be charging 15 for it.
I think that's what we did last time. This book didn't feel appropriate for a nude variant, just because of the dynamic between the only 2 main characters. It felt weird to make
a nude. Hey, you don't have to have a nude girl on the book.
Yeah.
I
feel weird about asking her to draw naked ladies. I don't know how I'd feel about asking her to draw dong. We're not making a Game of Thrones book here.
Just because you're sexist doesn't mean that your audience isn't a fan of it. I'm just saying.
That's true.
I'm an equal offender. Too many people. You see a swimsuit edition in comics, and it's just girls in bikinis. And while that's fine and dandy, I would like some men to be in their 6-pack abs showing off. I mean, I just picked up the Robotech swimsuit edition from the 70s/80s, and they had the men in there, and it was great.
In the 80s? What? Back when it was okay to be sexist?
No, they were equal offenders. I'm just disappointed now. I'm very disappointed in you.
Yeah.
There was an opportunity here.
As we had in the conversation last time we did this, I felt weird about doing nude covers last time, because I think the story should be able to stand on its own. But I wasn't quite confident enough in the fact that people would pick up a random book. But we have enough subscribers to our website, well, to our thing on our website, our mailing list. We have enough backers from our last book. I felt that we could probably do it without any type of nude variant this time around.
Let's even talk about that, because one of the things, and I don't know how you feel about this, and I'm curious on an art point as well, but not every book should have a nude cover, I feel. It's kind of like if you have an all ages children's book, it would be very weird if you had a nude cover for that.
Yeah.
Or if you have a cute superhero book like C.B. Zane does Mike, and Mike should not have a nude cover because it doesn't make sense. Or Tom Hutchinson just Critter really shouldn't have a nude cover. But then you have a character like Ursula Minor should have a nude cover, or Penny for Your Soul, which deals with sort of a hell angel in Las Vegas. That should have a nude cover because it makes a lot of sense. And so how do you feel about all that and sort of booking covers and figuring out what should have some and what shouldn't? And does it vary based on, what the book is dealing with, or even the characters in the book, for instance? Because certain characters would not be nude in any setting publicly, you know what I mean?
Do you want to take this first, or?
I mean, I think you kind of already said it. Certain characters shouldn't be nude in any public setting, but just from the few conventions we've gone to and like seeing what was ordered off of the Kickstarter, it sells. So instead of offering like a nude variant cover, I'm toying with the idea of just prints. So, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a main character from the book. Just to like kind of feed into that market, but not ruin the integrity of some of these characters, I guess.
Yeah, that's why I thought it worked with the first two books we did, because I feel like it's appropriate if there's nudity in the book, or there's a scene in which you had in your head that you didn't quite write, but you can put that on the cover. So when we did Olivia nude, that was just a scene that happened between the pages that you never actually saw. When she came up out of the basement from being tied to the chair, she went and showered. Appropriate. There's the scene where Christian's doing his thing in his memories in the second one. So we just added a little extra to that scene and did the nude cover for that. I felt like it was appropriate. In this one, there's a bit of a father-daughter feel between these characters. It felt weird. In the next one at the end, there is a nude scene that works.
No, it's very interesting because it is a very touchy subject, and also nude covers are overly used on Kickstarter right now, extensively, and it's because they do sell. And this is one of the things that I'm figuring out is that how do you fund your Kickstarter and make a business decision to have a nude cover with a cover artist, or have a suggestive cover, but also keep the integrity of your book, and also, say, hey, look, I want to be an all ages book, and balancing that. And, obviously I'm going to be producing a comic at some point this year, and it's something that I'm going to struggle with, and even going forward, depending on the book and what I'm doing. And I don't really know where I stand on the fence, because one of the things that I've been very public about this is that I don't buy nude covers because eBay has a hard time with that. And I've had friends who've had their eBay store suspended for a week, which means they couldn't buy or sell anything on eBay. I've had friends who've had their eBay stores shut down because they had new covers. And I've had friends who have had no problems selling new books. And so it's a very tricky entity on a selling point as well once you go out into the internet. And so it's tricky completely. And it's something that people like me who are into comic book investing have a hard time, because there's a lot of risk involved in a nude cover once you start saying, hey, I want to flip it, sell it, or even buy one.
Well, that's the thing. The upside about this one is apparently we did a good enough story with the first two books. We have 7 backers already in the first, 4 hours.
Neat.
4 of them are people who ordered nude covers last time. They ordered this book with no nude cover because apparently we did a good job last time and they liked the story. So nude covers do have their place, especially when you're trying to build an audience in the first place. But I'm not a big fan. I love naked women, don't get me wrong. But I'm not a big fan of gratuitous nudity that has no bearing on the story. Like, I've only seen some Game of Thrones, but I hear it's pretty gratuitous and some unnecessary.
Not to mention, sometimes it's just better to like suggest it. Like
Exactly.
it doesn't have to be a full naked person. Like just tease a little bit, and you'll catch someone's attention.
We were actually supposed to have that in the first issue of Kane, but it totally threw Allison off, and she forgot about it as she was drawing that page.
Oops.
Well. I mean, you know, I don't really care. I mean, I don't want gratuitous nudity, in which, again, I'm not a big nude guy on comic covers, because I do sell a lot of books that I buy at eventually, and it just makes it harder, puts a business at risk. But I do like suggestive covers because I think that, you know, they're more fun, and, you know, I think there is something to be said about leaving things to the imagination in a lot of ways. And so that's something that's very cool. And then I do actually, and I'm curious about this because this is something that I was toying with my Kickstarter, is that you kept your Kickstarter goal low at $100.
200 this time.
200?
Yeah, we went up $100 this time.
But still pretty low. And so what's the theory behind that? Because I've heard it on both sides of the angle, saying what you need to produce the book, what you should keep it low because you're going to beat your goal, and dealing with Kickstarter's algorithm. And also, you know, people are more likely to back an already funded project, for instance. And so what was the theory behind all that?
Well, I look at it like if there's no chance you're going to get the money yourself to fund a book, then absolutely set it to a funding goal that's going to fund your entire book. If you don't hit it, that's a downer, and maybe you should take a little money and get some art done and try again. That's what we did last time. But if there's a way that you can get the money, which me and my wife can, it'll just take a little longer, then set it at a low goal so you hit it no matter what, and then that will just help you get there easier. No matter what, this book is getting made. There's no world in which this book is not getting made. So even if we made $200 and that's it, then that's 2 pages of art that I don't have to pay for. But so I just set it low so that we could hit the goal no matter what. And like you said, I got the idea from Mike Shea, the dude who does Miskatonic High. He's the one who suggested it to me to set it, well, because he sets his at like 300 every time. So because you get funded quicker, and like you said, people are more likely to back a book that they are definitely going to get.
Yeah, no, it's probably something that I should have done with my, you know, podcast and all that stuff. I should have kept the goal at like 200. I think that and even going forward, when I come back next year for that project, you know, that's what I'm doing. But even when I fund a book on Kickstarter, which is coming, everybody, I'm not telling you when it's coming, but I'm probably going to keep that goal at what it's going to cost me to produce it, just because I do need the money to actually for the printing side of the business of it. But
exactly.
That's a whole different ball game. But I think it's very interesting Kickstarter strategy. But I do want to talk about actually what people can get with this stuff. So obviously you guys have a digital, you know, for the book. Then you have a print of the physical copy of the book. Then you have, you know, the entire Outlaw catch-up, which I think is Kane. And this book, digital, I think you have a physical catch-up. And then you have a whole bundle that I think is for stores, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's going to back it, but I figured I'd make it. I see it on a lot of Kickstarters, and some of them get backers on them, and some of them don't.
Yeah, retail is a fucking disaster. I know that because I bought a retail package, and it's not easy. Retail is hard, and retail takes a lot of work. And And so obviously there's a lot of that stuff in there. And obviously this is the cover. So
Great cover.
Yeah, how do you feel about this cover, Allison?
I'm pretty happy with it. I was so excited to draw wolves. The characters, this was my first time really drawing them, so I was kind of nervous because, well, the whole book had already been done. So it's like, I'm not too sure if I'm going to have them look exactly the same. It's like, no, I trust you. Just go for it. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I run just about any big project by my friend Jared, and he's just like, tweak this, do this, do this, do this. And it came out freaking awesome, I think.
It came out spectacular.
Yeah, no, it's a cool cover because it's definitely sort of noir, I want to say a little bit, where it's got that like noir vibe, and it's, you know, it's not completely, you know, black and white, but it's got that old West sort of like film feel to it. Yeah, that's a good word to use. So it's kind of in the vibe of it, and it's kind of like almost like a movie poster type thing.
Yeah, and it's different than what we usually do because I had a set vision for how Kane's covers were going to go. With those ones, I like them simplistic. One character and one situation and a blank background or whatever. You saw the cover for the next issue of Kane, too.
Yes, I did see that.
Yeah.
So I know exactly
That's
how.
so sad.
That one kicks it up a notch, but
a little bit. just a little tad bit, you know?
But it was cool to see her do something different with the cover. It was really cool. I love this cover. It's probably my favorite one so far.
Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff going on. And obviously this is, you know, the world just got a hell of a lot bigger, and John's got a lot of work to do.
Yes, sir.
He just needs a TARDIS and he'll be good to go.
Yeah, right.
A TARDIS and a scythe, and should change his name to HUNK, and you know,
I'll be sure to tell my.
There's a bunch of codes that I just dropped in that, and some people might get where I'm going with that, and some people might not. So I'm just saying.
I just assumed you were calling him a hunk. I was going to say I'll let my buddy Josh know you said that.
We could go with that code too. That's perfectly fine. You know, we can leave it at that. But I do want to back out of this entire, you know, comic for a second here, and I am curious because obviously I have not been to a comic convention in almost 3 years now, and I don't know if I'm ever going back, because if I can make money doing what I'm doing right now, I get everything I want in comics and sell comics and legitimately do it for my house. And, you know, I don't see the point in going, but I am curious how both of you feel about it and what that looks like, because I'm in Connecticut. I think you're in Michigan.
Pennsylvania.
Taylor. Oh, Pennsylvania.
Yep, we both are.
There's a lot of people. It's whatever. But anyway, I should have known that too, because you're like in the middle between almost like Philly and Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah. Smack dab in the middle, buddy.
Center.
You're in no man's land.
Yeah.
Pretty much. It's nice here. It's quiet.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh man, I almost ran out of gas in the middle of Pennsylvania once. Not a fun time.
No, you start to hear, if you're not from here and that happens, it starts to sound a little bit like
There was a town, and I thought I was gonna die in the middle of daylight.
Someone's gonna start asking you to pray real good, boy. The young kids won't get that reference. Burt Reynolds at his finest.
Clearly, we're talking in code now. We all know I'm not going to Pennsylvania anytime soon. At least not unprotected. Hey! I got a master sword, so I don't know what anybody else has, and I got 3 hearts, so I'm good to go.
I got a 9mm.
Well, I'm glad your 9mm will be effective, but it's nothing against my master sword with my 3 hearts filled.
All right.
I don't know if you get the reference.
It sounds familiar, but I mean, I don't get out much.
So in Legend of Zelda, when you master the ninth,
Oh, you're right. That's it.
You get like a beam saber.
I haven't played Zelda in about a decade, so I just needed to be caught up a little.
But anyway, enough about my outdated references here that are going straight out to TikTok. But how do you two feel about cons? Because it is a very interesting segment now with COVID sort of ending, but it's still being a thing, and also how things have shifted in the entire comic world.
Well, we've only done 2 so far, but I'm lining up quite a few this year. I like it. I need to get better at smiling and talking to people and initiating contact, but I mean, where I lack, she does pretty good. And I like it. We don't sell a lot, but I think the more I actually engage people, we'll probably do better when I'm not just sitting there with a miserable look on my face. Because I enjoy it. I really enjoy it. I like being there. I like meeting people who are excited to see our book and give me cash money for it. I'm a big fan of that. So I'm going to do them for as long as I can.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not our biggest moneymaker, but also the last 2 that we've gone to, we've only had our book. Like, that was it. It was just Kane. And then we had like a small print. I think going forward, we're going to have a whole lot more. But I'm less concerned about it making money as I am. It's an experience, and it's like networking. Like we made a couple of friends in Williamsport, and they have helped us drastically already. So I look forward to going to more.
Yeah, and we also built up our email list by 6 more people. So there's that. That we're up. We had 0 people on our email list at the beginning of last year. We're up to 50. So
yeah, that's the one thing about cons is that obviously I don't have any product. And I was doing it from a panel perspective, and at some point I'm going to have product. And cons can be very useful for a networking thing, and even just for having people have eyes on you and having a face connect. For me, I found a different way how to network online through interviewing, and I just do so much volume that for me at this point, it sort of makes sense for me not to go to cons. And I also have an eBay business, and I have a customer base there that started way before I was doing any of this. So I'm a unique breed, but there is the lack of sort of buddying up with certain people that you don't know who is going to be the next superstar in comics, or maybe you can, do business with them. And so I get that entire thing of that. And with cons, there are things that are lacking on the internet that I can see it on that front. But yeah, cons are very, very interesting. But yeah, I don't know if I'm ever going to be back to one at this point, because digitalization 2.0, guys, and I love it.
Yeah, right.
That's because and I'm curious how you guys feel about this, is that COVID has shown me that you need to have a bigger digital footprint massively, whether that's Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, doing online interviews. And I'm curious how you two feel about that versus almost having a physical footprint, where there's been a massive shift, at least in my world, because I was doing pre-recorded and then COVID hit and then I started doing live interviews. And legitimately, my Facebook page grown by 1,000 page likes. My YouTube has gone from like 290 to almost 400 in a very short amount of time with minimal work. So I'm curious how you guys feel about that shift and where comics are going, not necessarily getting rid of physical books, but how they're sold.
Well, as a 90s baby, you can probably relate. I have a hard time with social media. It's taken me a while to get used to, because we grew up in a time where internet was a thing, but going outside and meeting people and playing was a thing as well. So getting to know people online and trying to reach people through posts and likes and comments, it's difficult. I'm getting better at it, because I have to learn how to post things that people are going to engage with. And I have come up with a new Twitter strategy to get people who will back my book. But it's interesting, and we're going to see where it goes. But just a tip out there for you guys who make comics. If you want to build Twitter, Twitter's really hard. And the best thing I've learned is to go to other people's pages, go to their posts, find the people who have retweeted it, and friend all of them. Because at least half of them will friend you back, and then half of those people will retweet everything that you post. That's what I've learned works. Because I went from 50 Twitter followers at the beginning of last week to over 500 now. And a lot of them do engagement, so yeah.
That's good to know. That's actually really good to know.
It took me a while to figure it out. I went so long just going on Instagram and friending everyone who liked everything that other comic creators posted, and those people don't engage. You need to pick people who actually engage, not just like.
Yeah, I've got a love-hate relationship with that shit. Like, mostly because it is constantly changing. Because right when you think you get it, they change it on you. Instagram specifically, it used to be you just post something and you got organic growth. And that's just not how it is. I'm finding half of my followers don't see my stuff. But now their algorithm supports organic growth through Reels. So I've been noticing a lot more engagement that way. And I do like that I don't have to leave my house. If I want people to buy my stuff, I can just start posting things and I'll get more engagement and I'll get customers. But it's very frustrating because it becomes a chore and a job that I have to remember. And I hate when my phone goes off and ping, 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 ping. I'm like, go away. But I have to do it or I don't get paid.
Oh, I love when that happens after I've posted something. If my phone's dinging the day after I posted something, that's irritating. But right after, if my phone's going ding, 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 I'm like, hell yes. But I hate videos. That's why this real thing is what bothers me, because I don't like my voice.
Oh, I
realized
content.
I realized that a couple weeks ago when I did a video, I realized I sound like my older brother, which just irritates the fuck out of me.
I mean, I'm bad at TikTok, but that's where I'm at. So, but yeah, no, that Twitter strategy is actually very useful.
Well, there you go. Use it, buddy. You take that one.
I'm gonna go take it. I'm gonna run with it, and I'm gonna go break it and see what happens.
That's why you do these interviews. You do them to learn shit to help you.
I do a lot of stuff to help me.
Screw you guys. Excuse me.
You should see all the interviews that I do every year on just money. I should just start charging for all that stuff. I explained to somebody how to build a dividend portfolio with comic books. Legitimately like 3 weeks ago. That's coming out in like 2 weeks from now. So if you want to learn how to do stuff, and it's not that hard. But I digress. So obviously we've been talking for almost an hour and a half.
Yes, sir.
Much about nothing. I'll admit that. But obviously, I do want to give both of you a chance to promote the Kickstarter, promote what you guys are doing out at Outlaw Comics. Obviously, where can people find the book? Where can people pick up Kane and everything in between? And where can people find you guys on social media? Because that is very important right now as well.
Right now, I mainly just want people to go and back the book. I mean, you can buy single issues of Kane on our website, but you can also, pick up Kane whenever you order a copy of Unidentified on Kickstarter. So I would prefer everyone go there because I would like that to make as much money as humanly possible. And we're just at Outlaws Comics on everything. But on Instagram, if you go to the Outlaws Comics that hasn't had anything posted in almost a year, that's the one that we lost. And people at Instagram don't get back to you. So we had to make a new one. Go to the other one.
What color is the icon? Is it the white or the black one?
I think our current one is black.
Okay. And then I'm at Allison Sheppard Art on all social media. I'm going to be taking over the Outlaws Comics Instagram, I think, posting reels.
That's fine. You look better on camera than I do anyway.
Well, it's not going to be me. It's going to be little time-lapse thingies. No one gets to see my face.
That's fine. People like those too. People don't like to watch people writing on camera, so you go ahead and do that.
Yeah, no, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and obviously I've been saying this, and I keep saying it, is you got to support indie, and what that means is you got to back people's Kickstarters, you got to buy their books, you got to actually read their books, you got to share out what they're doing on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, on TikTok, anywhere where social media and anything about their book is posted. It's important to share it out. And if you back the project, you should let people know that you back the project, because that also further instills confidence. And so all of those things are important right now. And I get it, money's tight right now with certain people. And so if you can't back a project, you should at least, as I stated, share it out, because it does help, and you never know who's seeing that. It's happened on this show where somebody shares something out, and all of a sudden somebody gets a backer. And then that backer could be a backer for life, or it could be the very thing that put them over the edge. So that's something to keep in mind as well. As far as I'm concerned about me, obviously use Mixum to print your books. 5% off Andrew Davis, BCW Supplies, bags and boards, 10% off Pop Anime Comics. I'll buy my t-shirt because I am broke and I need the money. And well, I want that t-shirt to do well. And there should be at least 2 more coming this year once I get an idea for it. And I have a little bit of money to actually pay the designer in a third world country, because that's how we roll. And hey, Upwork, it works, guys. I know people who have funded comic books by Upwork contracts, and it's the funniest thing because you do not expect it. It's pretty funny, actually. But I digress right there, and I'm going to give both of you, or whoever wants to fight or duel or whatnot, the final word.
I want to remind the viewers that this Kickstarter ends after you all get your taxes. So go ahead and back us. You got the money. You know you do.
Well, I don't think I could have said it any better myself. So that is a wrap, everybody.
Oh, dear.